Hi everybody, my name is Caroline Strawson and I'm a multi-award winning EMDR and RTT rapid transformational therapist, and I help you heal that trauma of narcissistic abuse, moving you from complex PTSD to post-traumatic growth. And today what I want to talk about is the #1 trait of a narcissist. Now, you might be thinking, how can you narrow that down? But there is one in particular that is really, really prevalent across the board with all narcissists. Now, what exactly is narcissistic personality disorder? Well, it's a cluster B personality disorder that is listed in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, and this is what the American Psychological Association use as a methodology of how we diagnose. Now, you know, watching this, the problem with diagnosing a narcissist is that means they must say to themselves, hey, am I a narcissist? I'm going to go and get to see if I can get a diagnosis. Said no narcissist ever. That is why it is really, really difficult to treat or to actually look at the numbers in society of narcissistic personality disorder, because we don't know. We can make an estimate, and the estimate is around 2 to 7% of society are suffering with narcissistic personality disorder across the board, but we don't really know that because we don't get the diagnosis. This then makes it really hard for people like you and I who have come into contact with narcissists, because we might say, my ex is a narcissist, or my boss is a narcissist, or my mum is a narcissist. But unless we can normally say from a society perspective, they've been diagnosed as this, it's really, really difficult. And this is why often it's such an overused word. And actually, narcissistic personality disorder is really, really leaving their victims at rock bottom. It leaves you feeling broken. It's not just like any other breakup. It's not just like a conflict with somebody else. It goes far, far deeper with that. Every single client I work with who has suffered with narcissistic abuse has all the traits of complex post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Now, how often do you associate PTSD just with relationships? People don't normally think that. They think it might be that soldier going out to war. But actually, the complex nature of the psychological abuse of narcissistic personality disorder leaves you feeling broken. And to heal from that is a really multifaceted approach of things. I use things like EMDR to really clear any past traumas, and then RTT to really help upgrade those beliefs. Because time, sadly, does not heal narcissistic abuse, because it is a deep trauma to our system. We need to work our way through all of that. So what's the #1 trait then of a narcissist? Well, in the DSM, there are 9 factors that we use to diagnose narcissistic personality disorder. And to be diagnosed as a narcissist, there needs to be 5 or more. So as you can see, narcissistic personality disorder is really on a spectrum. So you could have a narcissist that has 5. Equally, you can have one that has all 9. But I'm going to talk about one today, one that really is across the board, you know, that every single narcissist will have, and that is lack of empathy. Lack of empathy, okay? Now, they may be able to fake that empathy. I'll talk about that in a moment, but literally every single narcissist will have a lack of empathy. So what exactly is empathy? Because we hear the word empath, which I am, and empathy. What are these? What's the difference between an empath and empathy? Well, being an empath means someone talks to you maybe about a problem, and you actually feel like the problem is yours. So when you walk away from that conversation, it's like you're taking all of that energy of that problem, of that illness, or whatever it is that that person is talking to you about, with you. So you feel like you've lived through that experience. You feel like you need to do something about it. You feel like it's happened to you. And that's what being an empath is. And again, you need to have very clear boundaries with this. That's for another video. I've got another video if you want to go and check it out, all about being an empath. And there's a quiz that you can do on that video to see how much of an empath you are as well. So the difference then between being an empath and just having empathy is that conversation you have with somebody with empathy means that you can understand why they feel like that, you can feel for them, but when you walk away, you can kind of leave it at the door. You feel sorry for them. You can understand. There is an empathy, a sympathy for what they are going through. And you can almost feel what it might be like in their shoes, even though you haven't walked them, but you can walk away and you can feel okay. But if you're talking to someone with empathy, it's the facial expressions. You know, they're kind of like, I'm really sorry to hear that. You know, that must be awful for you. So you are using your facial expressions, your tone of voice to have that empathy with somebody else. Now, a narcissist does not have this capability. And I want to give you an example to think about in your life with maybe any narcissists that you have come into contact with. So, as an analogy, and I will use my own personal analogy with this to give you an idea to think about, and I would love to know whether or not you can relate to this as well in the comments below. And I would love also, if you haven't hit subscribe with my channel, please hit subscribe on my YouTube channel, because I'm always putting videos up for you as well, so that you don't miss that, and hit the bell so you know when I upload a video, you get a notification. So I'll give you an example from my perspective. So when I was married to my ex-husband, he worked for an airline, he was a cabin crew. And on one particular occasion, we've got our 2 children, and I was really, really poorly. Now, for me to be poorly, I need to be pretty much on my deathbed. You know, I'm a fighter and I would keep going, because again, the parameters of someone, a codependent with a narcissist, is we always have a subconscious belief of not feeling good enough. So for me to actually ask for help and actually say, please stay at home, I'm going to struggle to look after the children because I'm so poorly, that was a big deal for me. Big, big deal. So it gives you an analogy of how poorly I was to even actually ask my husband to do that. And I actually remember this really, really vividly, this particular scenario. I was sat on the lounge floor crying because I felt so poorly, knowing he was going to be going away for 3 or 4 days, or even maybe longer, and just worried about how am I going to look after the children to the best of my capacity of being a mum. And I remember crying and just looking at my husband, expressionless. Literally expressionless. It was like he was watching me watching paint dry. That's the only analogy that I can think of that really, really sets the tone for this. I was there crying, saying, please stay at home. I really don't think I'm going to be able to look after our children. I feel so, so poorly. And blank expression. Now, also bear in mind that the airline that my husband worked for, when you call in sick, all you literally have to do is to say, hi, it's your name, here is my staff number, and then they will say, call in when you are well enough again. Hang up. That's the end of the call. That's what you do. So it wasn't like he would have to go into detail or anything like that. So I looked at him again and I said, please stay at home. Expressionless. Literally, I could have been telling him I had cancer, and it was just expressionless. Nothing at all. Eventually, because I think eventually he could see how agitated and distressed I was, and I was really, really going into all of my trauma responses there of fight, flight, and then freeze and shut down and crying, he eventually called work. But even this, he couldn't just call in work and say, hey, I can't come in, I'm poorly, or whatever reason. What he had to say was, my son is in hospital on life support. Look at the difference in that. Because then guess what happened? The person at the other end was like, oh my gosh, I'm really, really sorry to hear that. You know, I hope everything's okay. And it was getting supply again, even from the person on the end of the phone. It couldn't just be, I'm calling in sick, I'll call when I'm well. It had to be elaborated upon to even try and get supply off the telephone person at the other end. So eventually, obviously, he stayed at home. So I want you to think about right now 2 scenarios. One, if you were sat on your living room floor, and maybe this was with a parent, maybe it was with an ex-partner, maybe it's with your current partner. But if you sat down on that lounge floor, on that living room floor, and said to them that you were poorly, and I want you to think of if you were really, really poorly, okay? So, you know, maybe you've got a really severe illness, or maybe you are, you know, not wanting to go into work, or maybe like me, you know, your ability to look after the children in that scenario would have been limited. I want you to think about two scenarios. One, how would they react with nobody else around? With nobody else around. And how would they react if maybe your friends were around, his friends were around, her friends were around, or family were around? What would their reaction be like? Because I categorically know that my husband's reactions would have been, obviously on my own, paint dry. But if my parents had been there, or friends, or other family members, he would have done it in an instant, because he would want to look like the good dad, the good husband, because then he would get, oh, that's really nice of you for looking after Caroline. He would have got narcissistic supply. So I want you to think about this lack of empathy, that if you are on your own with your partner, with your parent, with your family member, even maybe with your boss, whoever is the narcissist in your life, what empathy would they show you if nobody else was around? Because if there is none, that is one of the key #1 traits of a narcissist. And they would fake that empathy if other people were around, because they would need to get that narcissistic supply. And I'd be really, really interested in the comments if any of you can relate to that, if any of you can relate to maybe feeling this lack of empathy. I always felt like with my ex-husband that, and the only phrase I can think of sometimes was the lights were on but nobody was home. It was like I was trying to get emotion and empathy from him, but it was just never there. And there was no depth of that. And I felt that as an empath. I felt that energy coming from him like that. So the #1 trait of a narcissist is this lack of empathy, because they don't have that. You can teach empathy to children as they get older, so that you can teach them how to be an empathetic person. But as they get older to be an adult, if they are a narcissist, they will always remain like that and have that lack of empathy. Other people with other mental health disorders where there is a lack of empathy, you can still teach them that, but not with a narcissist. You cannot teach them that lack of empathy. So I hope that's really helped you maybe think about some of the traits maybe of a narcissist in your life, or maybe in your past. And remember, this isn't about you having to prove anything to them. You're looking externally then for them to behave in a certain way, and we need to stop all of that. And that's the work that I do. So if you're feeling like you are maybe in a relationship with a narcissist, or you have been, then I have a free group on Facebook. Come and connect with me over on Facebook, and it's called Divorce and Breakup Support After Narcissistic Abuse. It's a free and private support group. I check every single application to join, because I know what a narcissist would do to try and get into that group. And touch wood, no narcissists have ever been in the group, because I'm very, very religious with all of that. I want you to know that there is hope, but I also want you to know that narcissistic abuse is deep trauma. And if you've been involved with a narcissist and you're still struggling, there are lots of reasons for that. So go and maybe watch some of my other videos just to give you some help and support, and to maybe take those first steps. Because for me, I went and had complex post-traumatic stress disorder from my past relationship, with depression, anxiety and self-harm. But I've gone on to have what we call in positive psychology post-traumatic growth and living a higher life because of the trauma I went through. But I see so many that are stuck. And this doesn't need to define you forevermore. But remember, you even being in a relationship with a narcissist, there will have been reasons for that. Codependency, lack of self, not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy. That makes you a magnet to one. When we change that, we shift our energy, and we don't attract those narcissists into our life, and we know how to deal with them too. So take care. I hope that really helped you. I'd love to know your comments. If you were sat on that living room floor, how would the narcissist in your life react as well? And remember, narcissistic abuse doesn't need to define you. It can actually allow you to shine a spotlight on all those inner wounds that you can start to self-heal, so that you can go on and live the most amazing life because of the trauma that you went through. I know that might seem strange to you, but believe me, when we do that deep inner work, that's exactly what can happen. Take care, everybody, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of the videos that I post. Take care.